All right. Hello and welcome to this interview with Alaiyo Bradshaw, one of our artists presently on display at the Alpha Art Gallery's current exhibition, Mirror to the World. My name is Katie Perrin, and together we will be going over some of Bradshaw's artistic process, as well as the pieces that were graciously contributed to both our physical and online presentations. We're going to start off pretty simple. Alaiyo, how are you today?
Oh, fabulous. Happy to speak with you and to exhibit in the Mirror to the World.
Amazing. Yeah, we're so lucky to have you. First, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where do you live now? And how did you initially get into art and first begin your career as an artist?
Okay, thank you. I was born in London, England, and I grew up largely in Michigan and now reside in Brooklyn, New York. I started painting in a college preparatory high school where I was allowed to major, and I majored in art, and two of my classes afforded me the opportunity to paint in watercolor, which is still my medium of choice. One of my teachers advised my mother, who was in a different profession and comes from a background of having two college professors as parents, but nonetheless, one of my teachers advised my mother to always encourage her daughter as she pursues her studies in art. And so I applied to our program at University of Michigan, and there I studied fine arts. I had an internship in a trade magazine during my first year in undergrad, and there they published several of my watercolor illustrations, therefore making me a published illustrator. So the work continued with watch face designs, men's ties, editorial illustrations, and some of the first major publications came during the time after I graduated from my master's program in SVA, where I studied a program called visual journalism, otherwise known as illustration. And my illustration career advanced, and I started illustrating images for the New York Times Magazine, major publishers like Hardcore Brace, book jacket covers, children's books, various newspapers, and magazine articles, posters, and etc. So this launched my professional career to a higher level. I was also continuously exhibiting in galleries and starting my career as an instructor.
Amazing. Yeah, it's so great to hear about your background. And today we're going to be talking about your watercolor paintings on display in Mirror to the World. And I wanted to know, what is the inspiration behind the selection of those paintings?
Well, this is, I guess, a retrospective of sorts of my mindset, place, time. Let's go through some of the images just to give you a summary of just a snippet, because reflection, I thought about the title of the exhibition, Mirror to the World. So I thought to put that piece in, and it is a woman facing herself in the mirror. So that's kind of literally what it is, and I can expand on that further. Kite Nest is a snippet of a large series of surrealistic nest paintings. In a box with the tools of my trade is a response to the pandemic. And Dixieland Jazz is an image I created for an exhibition in New Orleans. So these are different aspects and times and things that were spurred by moments in my life or opportunities that I had. And I thought it was just a good range of how I use the medium and the kind of subject matter that I deal with. So I wouldn't think of them as necessarily related, other than they're by me and they're in watercolor.
And you mentioned how you love the medium of watercolor and work with it a lot. And I'm wondering, why did you choose this medium, and how does it relate to your overall aesthetic practice and the messaging in your work?
I developed an interest in all painting in undergraduate school. So I was doing oil painting at first. But when I became an illustrator, I quickly moved back to watercolor, and I worked faster and smaller and could easily meet deadlines. Plus, I had a very small studio in graduate school and not a place to do my 4-foot paintings anymore. So storing and housing these watercolors and having them dry very quickly changed my medium. So I like color, depth, mystery, textures, the lighting, transparency, and opacity. So I guess the medium lets me paint what I paint. And I think a vision pops into my head and I want to capture the way I envision it. And careful planning allows the story to unfold, be it nature, people, the setting, real or imagined, are visions that need to come out through life, drawing, painting. And the most immediate natural medium for me now especially is watercolor.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's really evident in your work. And I think you do a great, I'm a huge fan of everything that I've seen.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I see that you have a lot of experience with teaching art and art history in college and high school settings, as well as through private lessons and workshops, and that you also have been active in exhibiting and working in the professional art world for many years. And as a student of art history myself, I'm wondering, how do you think this has shaped and informed your attitudes towards your current practice? And what is the approach or some of the specific approaches behind your aesthetic practice?
Okay, I don't know if I can answer all of those questions, but I'll try.
That's okay.
So forgive me if I'm not answering them all. I actually didn't teach in high school. I was a visiting artist in high school when I first started teaching. There was a program where I would go around to different high schools. I would show my artwork to the students, and then I would talk about my work. I guess that's teaching of sorts.
Okay.
So that was during my early career. I was hired to teach courses in Parsons, and one of my first teaching opportunities in Montclair Art Museum, which was great, where I trained docents and gave painting lessons actually in watercolor. And Montclair State University and Long Island University, where I taught art history and painting. So I was always teaching those in conjunction. And so art history enters into each of my classes, right? You have to pull from it in order to talk about the medium, in order to compare the topics, in order to expose students to more information. They have to know that their ideas, their images started somewhere, and that they can look at these references as influences, and then what are my influences? Where do my images come from? And who did I study? And well, who was I influenced by? So all of that is tied into art history. So now, as a full-time professor at Parsons School of Design and the director of the first-year program, I am overseeing a lot of faculty who are teaching art and design. I'm overseeing a lot of students. And in my class, I love classes which are digital design and painting, drawing, and other making practices. I love sharing my creative practice and knowledge with my students at Parsons, watching them grow, achieve learning outcomes, enjoy my classes, hopefully, and move on to be successful practitioners. That sharing is very rewarding to me.
Yeah, that's great. And now to pivot a little bit, in your artist statement, you mentioned your interest in using art as a kind of visual journalism to explore such themes as ethnography, cultural iconography, and social issues. In your works on display in Mirror to the World, what are some central themes or subject matters that you explore? And how do you explore themes of social conscience in your art?
Okay, that may apply to specific pieces, but I'll just go over kind of generally. But My work is a cross between representation and surrealism, if you look at the example of the pieces in the exhibition. And I have a crossover between my fine art and my illustration. So my personal work is more surreal. For instance, the Nest series, where you see kite nests, grew out of a desire to place a symbol of nurturing, protection, and the beauty of art created by birds in various settings, such as the sky and outer space and more. So no matter what I take, no matter what I'm painting, I want the viewers to take a journey through my images. So they see through my perceptions, my narratives, my way of making, so they become a part of that experience.
That's wonderful. And I know later on we're going to be talking a little bit about some of those pieces in more depth. But to start us off, I'm really intrigued by your piece, Dixieland Jazz. And I want to know, what is your motivation behind creating this piece? And who are the man and woman in the painting?
Okay, great question. Thank you. It was created for an exhibition in a gallery in New Orleans with the theme jazz. So I can use a quote that inspired me by one of the people depicted, one of the artists or musicians depicted in the image. And the male artist is Jelly Roll Norton. And this is a quote by Jelly Roll. "Jazz music is to be played sweet, soft, plenty rhythm." And that is kind of the inspiration behind what I think of those two musicians and when I think of Dixieland Jazz, which is so much of the culture in New Orleans, so that's why I chose that theme specifically, because of the location, right? And jazz isn't just jazz, right? It's derivative of many different regions, different processes, and different time periods, and obviously the musical instrument that the artist plays. So the location that you see behind it's kind of like a collage or montage of people in a setting. The location is the famous Preservation Hall, where so many musicians have played in the past. So that's an important symbol in the painting. And the other one is one of the few, as I was doing my research, because I wasn't so familiar, speaking of research and history, there are very few female New Orleans jazz artists. So I researched this wonderful woman called Emma Barrett, and her name is called, oftentimes musicians have nicknames, Sweet Emma Barrett. And I found these little snippets of her videos playing the piano, and both of these artists are piano players. So I was really intrigued by her as a female representative of that era.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and I think that we can clearly see that story play out between the two figures. To talk about another piece that features a female figure, I wanted to ask you some questions about your work, Reflection, and specifically the fact that it prominently features a female figure that appears to be of African descent. What is the story behind the woman in this work?
I think this is an example of a social conscious piece, and the art is about reflection, and in history, men actually have painted women as though they're vain and voyeurs of themselves, but what actually the men watching the paintings are voyeurs. So now let's take it up to current times and my intent. This is about, how does a woman of color see herself, her true self? How does she see herself in a society that often may see her as invisible or a target? Is she accepted as an individual to those around her? So those questions come into play as she contemplates herself in the mirror.
Yes. And you have so many pieces like that I've like in your I'm gonna butcher this word oeuvre. This is like a traditional art history word that like really speak to that. And you also like experiment with surrealism, and I think that your colorful still life in a box with the tools of my trade has surrealist elements. So in that piece, what is the motivation and symbolism behind the objects you chose to include?
So earlier I expressed that that was a reaction to the pandemic and how I felt in my studio. I felt like I was boxed in. I can see nature around me through my windows. I can go out of the door, obviously. I have a garden. But when I return here, I'm teaching. I am, online. I am doing my artwork. And I feel like I'm in a box. So if you look at here, you see my box that was actually in the exhibition. It's an easel box. And I opened it up, and then I got the idea of, oh, what can I put in this? Because this is very symbolic of a box, right? Literally. So the tools of my trade can be seen as my computer, teaching materials, image making materials. So the box symbolizes limitations we have during the pandemic, as I stated, especially being in quarantine, right? And that's when I made the image. So the mask that is worn by the bear, who's now my mascot, is actually one of my custom-made accessories, and I have a whole line of custom-made accessories which have my paintings on them. So he is wearing something that is layered with me, and when you see that mask, you see it as a symbol of where we come to be, right? We're still wearing masks, so that's that.
I love that. Especially, it's super applicable to the pandemic. And to talk about one of my personal favorite pieces of yours on display right now. I really love the luminosity in your piece Kite Nest and how you experiment with linearity and color to direct the eyes of the viewer. I would love to know the inspiration behind this piece. What do you intend to convey through this piece, and what is the symbolic significance of its iconography?
Okay. As mentioned earlier, this is an example of one of my nest series, which are now 9 images with interpretations of the nest in surrealistic settings. And Kite Nest, and you're talking about luminosity, I believe, lights up the sky which surrounds it, and making the nest more visible to the viewer and the mother flying to her nest. So the nest is a symbol of nourishment, spring, and protection. And the kite is made out of branches and leaves, if you look at the top. And again, furthering the symbol of nature and what birds can build from it.
Yes, and you touched on that a little earlier, and thank you for expanding on that. And now, of all your works, which is your favorite, or which do you have a particular attachment to? If you don't have a favorite, which piece would you like to talk a little bit more about or in more detail for?
Well, instead of picking a favorite, I will choose to talk about Kite Nest, which is, I think you said, one of your favorites, so I'll choose that one. And what's next? So I'm in the process of planning my future nest series. And for me, this could go on and on. So dinosaur nest, crocodile nest, turtle nest, and then I think the one I will tackle next will be a candle nest. So I've already created underwater nests and nests containing the world, like, which is on an image that was published for Earth and being more conscious of the environment for Earth Day. So those are some of my thoughts for future paintings, and so
Thank you, Alaiyo. I don't have any more questions. However, if there's anything else you'd like to add that you might have thought of during this interview, anything you're working on, I know you mentioned that the new series of paintings, or any shows you're going to be in, any lingering thoughts, feel free to share.
Okay, well, I just closed on an exhibition in Equity Gallery, and I included another one of my Nest series called Dream because it was about the reclining figure. So that was a very exciting opportunity. Was in New York City, and so I was really happy to be chosen for that. And as I said before, it's just important for me to bring a viewer in to my work and to have them explore and stop and think for at least 7 seconds, and to question what they're looking at and to take it in and form their own narrative. So thank you, Katie, and I'm so grateful to be a part of the exhibition at Alpha Gallery.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for speaking with us all today and sharing insight into your creations.
My pleasure. Thank you.
On behalf of Alpha Art Gallery, I would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, including Amboy Bank, Magyar Bank, Johnson & Johnson, New Brunswick City Center, Middlesex County Cultural and Heritage Commission, Bristol Myers Squibb, and Pfizer Inc. Alpha Art is confident that all who come to our 2021 shows will leave with a greater appreciation of the arts and the gallery showcasing of a variety of artists.